Before we begin our story, let me provide some important cultural context about Japan that will help you understand this tale. In Japanese culture, there's a strong belief in ancestral spirits and the supernatural world existing alongside our daily lives. Traditional Japanese homes, especially in rural areas, often feature Buddhist altars called batsudan where families honor their deceased relatives. The concept of iai, the family house, represents not just a physical dwelling but generations of family history and spiritual presence. Many Japanese believe that unresolved emotions, particularly from tragic deaths, can bind spirits to specific locations. This belief is so deeply rooted that even modern Japanese people often experience what they call reikan, spiritual sensitivity. Now let's begin our story. This is a true account told to me by my former girlfriend Sarah, who possessed extraordinary spiritual sensitivity. When I asked her about the most terrifying supernatural experience she'd ever encountered, she shared this story with me. I'm not sure I can fully convey the terror she felt, but among all the ghost stories I've ever heard, this one was by far the most frightening. This incident took place 19 years ago in the mountains of a remote prefecture, near a reservoir called N Dam. Sarah worked at an electronics store and was making a solo delivery of a television to a customer in a small mountain town. Her aunt happened to live in that same town, so Sarah decided to visit her first before making the delivery. When she asked her aunt about the delivery address, it turned out to be just around the corner. The television delivery went smoothly. Before heading home, Sarah asked her aunt about a shortcut to K-City, where she had another errand to run. Her aunt suggested a back road that passed by Endam. Sarah decided to take this route home. The day had been overcast and dim since morning, but Sarah didn't pay much attention as she drove along the mountain road her aunt had recommended. However, even though she should have descended the mountain and reached K-City by now, she found herself still winding through mountain paths. Worse yet, the asphalt pavement had disappeared, replaced by a narrow bumpy dirt road barely wide enough for one car. Sarah began to worry that she had taken a wrong turn. Just then, she spotted an elderly woman walking along the road, apparently returning from farm work. Sarah rolled down her window and called out, "Excuse me, does this road lead to K-City?" The elderly woman replied in a thick rural dialect, "No, dear, this road doesn't go there. If you continue a bit further, you'll find a house where the yard is wide enough to turn your car around." Sarah thanked the woman and continued driving toward the house. Soon, she spotted the house the elderly woman had mentioned. But what she saw was puzzling. Why would such a grand estate exist in these remote mountains? It was an enormous property with a main house, a barn, and several storage buildings, the kind of compound wealthy farmers built in the old days. Sarah pulled into the yard to turn her car around. As she was maneuvering her vehicle, she noticed something strange. The same elderly woman who had given her directions was now standing right beside her car. How could the woman she had left far behind on the road have gotten here so quickly? Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but she rolled down her window anyway to thank the woman again. The elderly woman smiled and said, "Since you're here, why don't you come in for some tea?" Despite her unease, Sarah found herself getting out of the car. From this point on, while her memory remained clear, Sarah felt as though she was being controlled by something beyond her own will. The elderly woman turned toward the house and called out, "Grandfather, Kyoko has come home." Sarah was confused. Her name wasn't Kyoko, and she had never met these people before. An elderly man emerged from the house, beaming with joy. "Ah, Kyoko, welcome home," he exclaimed, greeting Sarah as if she were a long-lost family member. Sarah felt an intense gaze from somewhere within the main house. She looked nervously toward the barn, but couldn't see inside. Suppressing her growing fear, Sarah sat down on the wooden porch as the elderly man gestured for her to do so. The grandfather continued to call her Kyoko and welcome her home. Sarah assumed the old man was suffering from dementia and tried to correct him. I'm sorry, but I'm just a traveler passing through. I'm not Kyoko. But the elderly man completely ignored her words. Suddenly, Sarah lost consciousness. When she came to, she found herself sitting in the Buddhist altar room of the main house with the elderly man. She had no idea how she had gotten there or why she had blacked out. The old man began speaking to her again. During the day everyone else is out working, so it's just me here alone. Fighting her growing unease, Sarah replied, I see, but isn't there someone in the barn? Ah, that's my great-granddaughter, he said casually. She's got tuberculosis, so we keep her there. She doesn't really count as company. Oh, she's recovering from illness. That must be difficult, Sarah responded sympathetically. The moment she spoke these words, something grabbed her arm tightly. Startled, Sarah looked down to see a little girl, about 3 years old, clutching her arm. Sarah had no idea when or how the child had entered the room. The little girl stared at Sarah with a completely expressionless face. Sarah's instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong with this house, and she tried to flee, but her body refused to obey her commands. The grandfather scolded the child. Hey, this person is not your mother. What happened next defied all belief. The little girl suddenly lunged at the grandfather and bit into his neck. Her previously blank expression had transformed into something bestial. Her teeth became fangs, and her eyes glowed red with an otherworldly light. According to Sarah, it was the most horrifying face she had ever seen. Sarah had reached her breaking point. She tried to stand up and run, but her body still wouldn't respond. Looking down at her sift, she discovered the reason why. Countless hands were emerging from the tatami mats, gripping her body and holding her in place. But that wasn't all. These hands were speaking to her as they held her down. Kyoko, you've finally come home to the master. You can never escape from here now. Sarah felt herself on the verge of fainting when she looked at the grandfather beside her. The little girl who had been biting his neck had vanished. And the grandfather was no longer an elderly man. He had transformed into a middle-aged man in his 40s. This man joined the chorus of voices, grinning wickedly as he said, Kyoko, you can never return to where you came from. Sarah was trapped in a nightmare with no escape. The situation changed when the man suddenly stood up, grabbed Sarah's hand and dragged her outside. Unable to resist, Sarah was pulled from the house and made to stand in front of one of the storage buildings. Trembling with fear and confusion, Sarah watched as the man opened the door and forced her to look inside. What she saw in that building was beyond her worst nightmares. Inside was a prison cell, like those seen in historical dramas. And lying inside the cell was a woman. With a trembling voice, Sarah asked, Deborah, who is this? The man replied with a sinister grin, Who? That's your sister, of course. Sarah was on the verge of complete panic and desperately wanted to escape. She noticed her car was still parked in the same spot. Breaking free from the man's grip, Sarah ran toward her vehicle. Suddenly the elderly woman appeared in front of her car, placing a dead crow on the windshield. Kyoko, she hissed, you cannot go anywhere now. Fighting to maintain her sanity, Sarah brushed the dead crow off her windshield and jumped into her car. She desperately tried to start the engine. As is typical in these kinds of stories, the car wouldn't start at first. Finally, the engine turned over and Sarah quickly turned the car around to flee down the same road she had come from. She didn't dare look back. The story should have ended there, but the spirits trying to possess Sarah were far more persistent than she had imagined. Despite driving back along the same single road she had taken to reach the house, the path grew narrower and narrower. Eventually it became too narrow for her car to pass through. Sarah found herself stuck, unable to move forward or backward. As she sat there wondering what to do, a red bridge that hadn't been there before materialized in front of her. In the next instant the elderly woman appeared beside her car. I told you that you couldn't return, didn't I? That bridge was built just for you. You must cross it. Sarah steeled herself for one final escape attempt. She put the car in reverse and tried to back away as far as possible. Ignoring the old woman, Sarah continued backing up. But then the elderly woman attached herself upside down to the front windshield, screaming continuously, I won't let you escape. I won't let you escape. Sarah kept reversing, trying to ignore the screaming figure clinging to her windshield. But once again the same red bridge appeared ahead of her. At that moment Sarah felt she had exhausted all options. As if summoned by an invisible force, she got out of her car and began walking unconsciously toward the bridge. But then, a voice spoke directly into her mind. The voice of the grandmother who had raised her as a child. Sarah, you must not go that way. The moment she heard this voice, Sarah lost consciousness once again. When she regained awareness, she was driving her car. After continuing for a while, she finally reached a familiar asphalt road. It was truly a narrow escape from what could only be described as the entrance to the afterlife. You might think this story is too incredible to be true, but I assure you, this was Sarah's genuine experience. And her terror didn't end there. There's a disturbing aftermath to this encounter with Endam. That evening, Sarah returned home exhausted and checked her belongings. She discovered that something important was missing. Her driver's license, which she had definitely had that morning, was gone. She immediately went to the police station to apply for a replacement. What happened next was truly unbelievable. At the police station, Sarah learned that her lost license had been turned in as lost property. She was relieved and began the process of reclaiming it. However, when she examined the license, she discovered that the photograph was not her own face, but that of a complete stranger. Naturally, the police suspected forgery or criminal activity and kept the license for examination. The investigation revealed that while the photograph had indeed been replaced, there were no signs of forgery. It was a completely genuine driver's license. Later, through the police investigation, the truth about the photograph was revealed. The face in the photo belonged to the daughter of the F family, the very household where Sarah had delivered the television that day. The woman's name was Kyoko. Moreover, the person in the photograph had died in a traffic accident 2 years earlier, near the very location where Sarah had her terrifying experience. The elderly woman who had purchased the television was originally from a wealthy farming family in that area. In her youth, she had conflicts with her family and essentially eloped, fleeing from home. After her elopement, she lived in Tokyo for many years. By coincidence, her daughter married a man from the town near the old woman's family home. In her old age, the elderly woman had returned to her birthplace to live with her daughter and son-in-law. The deceased Kyoko was the old woman's granddaughter, her daughter's child. When Kyoko died, she was the exact same age as Sarah. Most remarkably, the family's original home, the ghostly mansion that had lured Sarah, had long ago been submerged beneath the waters of the dam. There are apparently even more shocking revelations to this story. But this is all Sarah told me that day. She promised to share the rest when we meet again. I've written down everything I heard while it was still fresh in my memory. It's hard to believe, but it seems that in our ordinary daily lives, there are invisible doorways to other worlds just waiting for unsuspecting people to stumble through them.